Hey folks, it's Chet from Tag Along with Chet, and we're going to do another episode of Hangar Chet-Chat, and I think it's going to be episode number 9, and this will be a follow-up of the episode number 8, the return, you might say. Anyway, it's a heck of a great day today. It's colder than witches. And it was about minus 25 this morning when I woke up, so that's pretty damn cold as far as I'm concerned. I don't know, I can't remember what that is Fahrenheit, but I think it's up to a balmy minus 15 or 16, so that's what, 7 or 8 Fahrenheit. Sun's shining like crazy. I can't go flying because the taxiways have quite a few drifts on it, and I believe the runway does as well. It's got about a foot of snow, which has drifted across from the snowfall we had yesterday, and the day prior, and the day prior to that. So you can see I've got some drifts out here alongside my hangar, and that's pretty well what we've got on the taxiway as well. I believe the snowplow has been through it, but apparently the wind picked it up again, and it has blown across. So I've got some alongside my hangar here, and also just a bit of stuff in front of the hangar door. But other than that, it is not too bad. That stuff in the hangar door, that's no issue. And the taxiway here seems to be pretty good. Not quite sure what it is up on the north end out there. I'm sure there's some stuff blowing across there. Yeah, I can see some drifts. So anyway, we're not going flying today anyway. It's too damn cold. It's going to take a couple hours to heat up the airplane. So let's go inside and get the office warmed up and do another episode of Hangar Chet-Chat. Dog's having fun. What are you doing, Piper? What are you doing? Hey, Piper, what you doing? Hey? Oh, you like that, do you? Okay, come on. Let's go inside. Let's go inside. Let's go. Well, I just walked into the hangar, and it's remarkably a lot warmer in here. And the reason being is the sun shines on the south end of the hangar out here, and that metal just heats up, and it actually almost acts like a radiator. So it's actually not too bad here in the hangar itself. But we're going to go into the office. I got the stove on in there already. We'll make some coffee, and let's get to it. Okay, we're in the office. It's nice and warm in here. It's probably about 20 degrees in here now, which is just great. And that's centigrade, mind you. I've got the old furnace going out here, so yeah, it's nice. As a matter of fact, I should take my jacket off here. Anyway, let's continue with the Hangar Chet-Chat, and this is episode 9. Now, the last one you saw, episode 8, was the trip from Vancouver to Toronto. Now this will be the trip back again. That's I had to get the airplane obviously back to Delta Airpark. A friend of mine owned Burlington Airpark, and we'd known each other for, I don't know, 10, 15 years at least. And then of course I got transferred to Vancouver. But in any case, we communicated with each other during all that time, and I'd been back a few times, so it was kind of nice to have them right there, and I could just fly the airplane from Toronto Island Airport and flew it back into Burlington Airpark. And of course my folks lived in Burlington, plus I had a lot of friends and family friends and so forth in Burlington at that time as well. So I had a place to stay. So on the 12th of August 1979, I flew the airplane back from Toronto Island Airport to Burlington. Then 3 days later, that would be on the 15th of August, I flew the airplane back to Delta Airpark in Vancouver. The trip was not uneventful. The weather wasn't bad. An individual that I met on the trip that also had a similar to a Cub, a J3. He had an L4, and you'll see a picture of it. I've got a picture of it. In any case, we flew together all the way back. Flew all the way to Alberta with me. He lived up in Brooks, and anyway, we'll get into that a little bit later. Anyway, the range on his aircraft was not like mine. I had an extra 10 gallons fuel tank in the right wing, plus the 10 gallons I had in the front. So as I mentioned on previous episodes, that I had, I don't know, 5-6 hours of fuel on there, which is plenty for me in a Cub. Anyway, we left on the 15th of August 1979 and headed back, and we actually put 9 hours and 30 minutes, 9.5 hours of flying time. Now, we made quite a few stops. We had to stop in the American Sioux for customs clearance. And we kept on trucking until we got to Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes, as you recall from the previous episode, was where we were supposed to go and have that little bit of a do there, the second last day of the Aries, and we never made it. Anyway, we stopped in there, we tented there. And from Land O'Lakes, we kept right on trucking, and we went all the way to Souris in Manitoba. In any case, we made previous stops to that. Now, like I mentioned, Ken didn't have the range that I had, so he had a couple of jerry cans in his airplane, and when he got low on fuel, he would just wiggle his wings or indicate to me that he was going to be landing, and we'd land off field. We wouldn't land on an airport. He would just say, well, I've flown so many hours now, so I better land. So he'd look for some place to land, and we'd land in some farmer's field somewhere or on a road, one of those gravel roads out there, and we'd just fuel up. Or he would just fuel up, and I would just come in and give him a hand, and I'd land, and we'd be there chit-chatting for a half hour. Anyway, the second last stop of that day, we ended up, it was getting kind of late, I believe, and he fueled up, and off we went, and we had no radio contact with each other. We had no radios, so we would kind of signal to each other. He'd come up beside me or something like that, and he'd say, okay, we've got to go down. Okay. So anyway, I thought he was navigating. He was a little bit in front of me, and he thought I was navigating, I guess. And we just kept on flying and flying, and it just got darker and darker. Now, mind you, folks, this is a Cub, okay? There's no electrics, there's no nav lights on it. Anyway, we kept on flying. Now, in the summer, things aren't that bad. Like at 8 o'clock at night, you can still see and so forth. And it was a clear night, full moon, so we just kept on trucking. And I thought, gee whiz, where are we going? You know, so I kind of came up beside him, and I had my map with me, and I held the map up and out through the door, and I kind of showed it to him. I said, where? You know, I just kind of went, well, where are we going? And he went, well, I don't know. I thought you were. So, oh, okay. I got the picture. He thought I was navigating. So anyway, I'm looking around, and I didn't have a clue where I was. I finally found out by looking at the map and, you know, looking back and forth and sort of estimating where we might be. And I finally figured it out. And then I thought, well, there's no airport here. So, at least that was on the map. So I thought, well, what are we going to do now? You know, I thought, geez. So anyway, way in the distance, there was this little town. And you could see it because it had a silo in it. I believe it had a silo or a water tower or something. I can't recall. So I thought, well, we'll just head for that town. And as we were going towards that town, I also saw this rotating beacon outside of town. But it wasn't an airport beacon. It was, I didn't know what it was. I mean, it had, the flashes were way too fast for an airport beacon. So I thought, well, we'll just head towards that beacon, because who knows? So we headed out there, and sure as heck, there's this grass strip. And it was a spray plane strip. Yeah. On top of this post, which stuck maybe 20 feet in the air, there was a rotating beacon from a tow truck. just an orange beacon going round and round and round. That's all it was. But I guess it came in handy. Anyway, we circled, and sure as heck, there's this field out there. There was no airplanes based there. There was this old trailer parked there. And so we landed. We thought, hey, this is cool. You know, we got a trailer here. Of course, the trailer's open, and we parked the airplanes, and we thought, well, we don't even have to set up a tent. There's a trailer here, and it had a couple of couches and an old chair and a desk, and thought, well, we'll just bunk in here. So we looked through the trailer, and everything seemed to be good, you know. And then all of a sudden, we hear this noise outside, and there's this big station wagon comes rolling in. And there's this couple get out of the station wagon with, I don't know, 4 or 5 kids. I can't remember how many there were. There was enough of them. And they came in and they started chatting with us. And, well, they'd heard about the air race. And we said, yeah, we're on our way back home now. And they thought, oh, this is cool, man. This is cool. You know, we're talking to these guys, and they were in the air race. And I guess they must have listened to CBC or something. I don't know. But anyway, they said to us, well, look, have you guys eaten yet? And we said, no, we were just going to grab a granola bar, and we had some drinks with us. And they said, well, look, why don't you use this truck here? And beside the trailer was this big tow truck. You know, it was a big sucker. Like, I mean, it wasn't no small tow truck. It was a big tow truck. And just drive that into town. And I'm looking at Ken, and Ken's looking at me, and this big tow truck, you know, driving it into town. We said, well, thank you very much. I said, we really appreciate that. And the kids wanted to look at the airplanes, and they thought this was all cool and everything. So anyway, they finally left, and they told us, well, the keys are in the glove compartment and blah, blah, blah. And we, okay, fine. But I said to Ken, Ken, do you know how to drive these things? Well, it just so happened Ken owned a heavy-duty equipment company, I believe it was. And I didn't know this, and he said, no problem. He said, I can do this, Chet. So he gets in the truck, starts the truck up, and we drive into town with this big diesel truck, big saddle tanks on the side, and happens to be an A&W in this town. So we drove in, and we had a bite to eat at A&W, got back in the truck and drove it back, and I think we each threw $5 or something in the glove compartment for the gas we used. And well, we're going to retire now. So bang, we climbed into our sleeping bags. We each had a couch, and we had a real good night's sleep. Man, I woke up the next morning. I felt really good. But something wasn't quite right. You know, it was a beautiful day. I remember that, looking out the window of this trailer that we were in. And as I'm kind of looking over the side of my sleeping bag, you know how you got the sleeping bag, and it's just kind of over your nose like this, and I'm looking down towards where my feet were, and there's these mice all running all over me. And I thought, oh, isn't that cute? This reminds me of Farley Mowat and Never Cry Wolf, or whatever it's called, that movie where he wakes up in a old shack up north somewhere, and he's got all these mice running over him. But anyway, it didn't bother us, and we just took the sleeping bag, shook it out, and rolled them up and put them in the airplane, and we blasted off. So that would have been probably around the 16th, 16th. Probably would have been on the 16th, the night of the 16th. And then on the 17th, we blasted off again, made a few more stops. And then, of course, Ken, he had to go to Brooks. And he said to me, he said, well, Chet, he said, why don't you come up to Brooks? He says, I live up there and stuff like that. And I said, look, I got to get home. I said, I've been away from home now. I got family out there that wonders where the heck I've been, because, we didn't phone as much as we did in those days, where you pull out your cell phone and you give them a call. To get to a phone in some of the airports we stopped at was a bit of a hassle, because some of them didn't even have phones. So we got part way, and he waved goodbye, and bang, that was it. Ken went up to Brooks, and I kept on trucking, and I went to Tabor. So as I'm driving, or as I'm flying into Tabor, it's getting a little late in the evening already. That's, I think, the hours we flew, like I said, the first hour, or the first day was 9.5 hours. The next was 8 hours and 48 minutes, and the next was 8.5 hours. So we were doing a lot of flying. So Ken went his way, I kept on trucking. And I was going to go to Taber, Alberta. So I get to Taber, join the circuit, and as I'm coming in on final, I'm pulling back the power, and as I pulled back the power, I heard this boom. And I thought, uh-oh, that didn't sound good. Anyways, a backfire through the muffler. And I thought, oh, that's not good. So anyway, I landed, taxied in, opened up the clamshell doors to get out to put my tent up, and I immediately got attacked by swarms of mosquitoes. It was just horrendous, the amount of mosquitoes that were attacking me out there. And I thought, I got to get this darn tent up because, you know, I mean, I'm just going to get eaten alive by these mosquitoes. So I've quickly put up the small little tent I had, sprayed it with some off on the inside to keep the mosquitoes out, and dove into this tent. I totally forgot about checking the problem with that backfiring issue. The next morning I woke up bright and early. It was a nice sunny day. And I was just, you know, doing my walk around. And I always have a procedure in my walk around where I grab the stack from my muffler. I don't know why, I've always done this. I want to make sure it's secure. And I moved it, and geez, I mean, it almost came off. I thought, oh, geez, oh, wait a minute, this isn't good. So apparently what had happened was the stack that's welded into the bottom of the muffler had cracked right at the weld. And yeah, it was ready to come off. I mean, it was just hanging at 3/4 of it. It had a big crack all the way around it. And I thought, oh, that's not good. So I thought, well, now I got a bit of a problem. Well, fortunately, 3 guys came in. And I explained to them, well, blah, 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 you know, and they said, don't worry about it. We got a mechanic out here that can fix that. But he won't be here until, oh, I can't remember, later on in the morning anyway. I said, okay, well, that's fine. I guess I'm gonna wait. So they said, well, look, while you're waiting, why don't you come with us? He had a Cessna 170, and he said, we're going to look at the crop, and I forget how many sections they wanted to look at, but they apparently been doing some spraying fertilizer on the sugar beets. Now, Taber is known for sugar beets and corn. You've probably heard of Taber corn. Anyway, it's real good. Every time it's season, we have to buy Taber corn. But anyway, the sugar beets, they wanted to check out. And they wanted to see how well the fertilizer had taken to the crop. So I said, well, that's all right. I don't mind. So 2 guys got in the back seat. I got in the front seat with the guy that owned the airplane. And we're taxiing out. And, you know, I look at the fuel tanks. Well, the Cessna 170, as the older Cessnas had, they had wing tanks. The gauges were actually right in the root of the wing. One on the right tank, and then there was another one on the left tank, and they were kind of recessed into the wing from the cabin. And there was a red zone, and then it would have a 1/4 and a half and full. And the tank on the right side was flickering off in the red zone, and it has a little thing that says no takeoff zone. And then on the left one, it had no takeoff zone, and it was flickering in that area as well. So I said to him, I said, hey, look, are your fuel gauges, are they accurate? And he said, yeah. He said, yeah, they're not bad. He said, but he said, don't worry about it. He said, we got plenty of gas. And I said, oh, okay, fine. Well, you know your airplane. And sometimes what happened was these things were not exactly 100% accurate. Now, they could not be 100% accurate on the high side or on the low side. Anyway, I figured he knew his airplane, so off we went. But I managed to say to him, I said, look, when you take off, be sure you don't do any abrupt maneuvers because, you know, you never really know. And he said, well, I just flew it down from so-and-so and I fueled it up and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it was full tanks there and, okay. You know, you hate to step on somebody else's toes when they know their airplane because there's always little discrepancies. Anyway, we we looked at the field, and we flew around for, I don't know, 20 minutes, and looked at this field, and the guys in the back were looking at it, say, oh yeah, we got to do that over again. We missed a spot there, and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, we ended up going further and further away from the airport. And wouldn't you know it, we're low level, and the engine quits. And he flips it to the other tank, and it starts again. The engine's running, purring away. I said to him, well, look, I said, you know, I don't want to tell you what to do. I said, but if you're gonna, we're still flying away from the airport. Now, if that one had the same amount of fuel as that one had in it, I said, you know, we got a bit of a problem getting back. I said, so why don't you make sure that all the fuel is out of that right tank? So I'll just fly one wing low and kind of siphon it out until it, you know, until there's no fuel left in that tank at all. So that's what he does. He flips it over the other one, and we're flying a little bit on the you know, one wing low and draining the tank on the high end. And we flew around like that for another 5 minutes or so, and then it quit. So we knew that tank was totally empty. And I said to him, yeah, but we're still flying away from the airport. I said, you know, you're going to get some fuel, or do you know some other place out here that's got fuel? Well, I guess the lights went on, and he decided that, yeah, maybe we better head back. So he turns the airplane around, and I said, and on top of that, I said, maybe you ought to lean this thing out a bit. I said, because I don't know if we're going to make it all the way back. I said, if that one's got the same amount of fuel as that one, I said, you know, we're going to be SOL. And anyway, and wouldn't you know it, we get right overhead the town of Tabor. Not more than a couple of minutes from the airport, which is on the north side of the river from Tabor. And the engine quits. And I thought, oh boy. And I mean, none of this right wing, how low it, I mean, we were at a reasonable altitude, but not at an altitude where we could make anything outside the town. So he notices this road in town. And he says, well, I'll land on that road. Now, there was no panic or anything. It was just, when you're in the prairies, everything's flat. So, you know, you got a pretty good chance of walking away from it. You might wreck the airplane. But anyway, he says, well, we'll land on that road over there. And I looked at it, and I thought, well, that road has a field across from it. It's a triangle field. You know, it was like a pie shape, or not a triangle. Yeah, it was like a triangle, a pie shape type thing. At the end of this field was a grain silo, which was right beside the road. And I said to him, well, look, I said, you know, there's houses on that side of the road, and I'm sure there's power lines. If there's a road there and houses, there's got to be a power line, telephone lines, who knows what. So why don't we just go in that field over there? Well, yeah, good idea. Okay, so anyway, he goes sort of like, we had enough altitude to clear everything, so he goes down and he gets all set up, and I turned around and I said to the guys behind us, I said,
all right, now everybody, get in crash position.
So in a Cessna 170, which I've flown, I had a Cessna 140, as you probably know from previous tag along with Chet videos that I've got on here. But the Cessna 140 is similar to a Cessna 170. Cessna 170 is a 4-seater. Cessna 140 is, and a 120, they were 2-seaters. But the Cessna 170, which I was looking at one time to buy, and I had flown them before, is a type of airplane where if you put on full flaps and you stick the nose straight down, it'll do 70 miles an hour. It just, you can put the flaps on, stick the nose down, and you kind of point it at where you want to be. And none of this stuff where you kind of sit back and analyze, you know, where to touch down. This is an amazing airplane. If I were ever to get another tail dragger, I'd probably go for a Cessna 170 because I think it's a great airplane. So anyway, got the silo to come over. So he sticks the nose down, had full flaps on. Over the top of the silo we went, and I said, well, look, you know, when we hit the grass, you know, where he rounded out. I said, we're just both going to just kind of tap on that left brake. I said, because there's not much fuel there. So, you know, when we get near the end out there, we'll just do a ground loop. So what'll happen is the nose of the airplane, when you're going straight in like that, will do a complete circle and come back the other way. So basically the tail will end up where the nose was, and the nose was where the tail used to be when you're coming in. Anyway, as we're getting near the end of the field out there, it looked like we weren't going to make it. It looked like we were going to go in the ditch. So we both hit the left brake and the airplane just went boom, 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 boom. And the tail end ended up in the ditch, and the nose was headed back towards where we came in from. And there was a whole pile of dust, grass, and the weeds in this field where we just landed in were at least a foot high. And the soil there was, it's that black stuff. It's just like dust. Dust was just horrendous when we actually landed, as well as doing that ground loop. And the people from across the street in the houses, they were coming out wondering what the hell was going on. And oh, you know, we piled out of the airplane. The dust was all settling, and it was just like a normal. Oh, well, we just landed. Blah blah blah. The guys got out of the airplane, and the guy out of the grain elevator, he came out, and the guy that was flying, whose name I cannot recall. Anyway, he you know, it's just like an old town, you know, or a small town talk, or a small town. Everybody knows each other. So, oh, it was like, hey, hi, Bill. Hey, listen, can I use your pickup truck? I got to go to the airport and pick up some fuel, and I got to drop these guys off at their house. Oh yeah, no problem, bang. So we picked up this truck, and it was just like, it was like an everyday affair out there. And I'm sitting back saying, she said, you know, I just flew, I don't know, thousands of miles in my Cub across Canada, and about 3/4 of the way back again, and this guy's trying to kill me by running out of fuel. Anyway, we made it, and it was an experience, and I don't think I want to go through that again, but it's strange, you know. I always thought I'd be scared, but I wasn't. I just figured, oh well, I think I can do this, and he knew he could do it, and yeah, we just did it. But he was a good pilot, obviously, and for all I know, he could have been a crop duster. I really don't know, but I just thought that I guess when you're brought up in the airline world, you think a little bit different about this, the safety aspect of things. There's a little bit of recklessness goes on with some of these guys, and I don't know. I guess that's the way it was. I know I've been reckless, so I'm not going to hold it against him. I've done some dumb things in my life as well. So nothing against the guy personally. We all made it, and everybody was happy, and it's an experience we went that I went through. So it's something to chat about in Hangar Chet-Chat. Anyway, the next day, oh yeah, now, so we're back. But I still had the problem with the muffler. So, which was another experience. We go over to the hangar, and there's a guy out there, and chatted with him. He says, oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think I can weld that. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And he says, oh darn, he says, I don't have any welding rods. Now, a muffler on an aircraft, it's stainless steel. So the stack that comes out of it has to be welded with a stainless steel welding rod. And he didn't have any. But hey, he had an out. Go to the hardware store. So we bombed off in the hardware store, and he says, hey, I need to buy a few bicycle spokes or motorcycle spokes. It didn't matter, either bicycle or, oh yeah, no problem, here, bang. So we got some bicycle or motorcycle spokes, which are stainless steel. Took them to the shop, and he welded this stack back on there. And that stack, to the best of my knowledge, stayed with that airplane until it was sold. And I sold it, I don't know when, a few years later I think I sold it. And then someone else owned it for quite a few years. Then it was went all the way to Winnipeg, and it was sold, and it went to back into the States. I think it ended up in Wisconsin. And as far as I know, the chap that bought it from me, who actually was one of our pilots, who bought it for his son that was learning how to fly, he never had any problems with that muffler at all. And the kid got his license on it, I believe, or his hours out of it, because if you want to get hours, buy a Cub. I mean, you won't go very far, but you'll sure get the time. So that was the way that went. So on the 18th, that was the next day, so I stayed another night there. And then the next day I left and I went to Cranbrook and then overnighted in Grand Forks. I got about 5.5 hours flying time in there. And then on the 19th of August, I went from Grand Forks back to Delta. And that took about 3 hours and 3.5 hours. And yeah, so that was the end of the trip back to Vancouver, well, Delta Airpark, just south of Vancouver. And the total time of that trip, the trip going over from episode 8, and this one going back to Delta Airpark, 72 hours and 6 minutes. So if you want time, fly a Cub, because you get lots of time in a Cub. But it was probably one of the better experiences I've ever had flying. It was just a great trip, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Anyway, folks, that's I'm going to wrap it up here, because there's actually there's a lot more to come. I'm only right now I've got another, how many pages in here? This is my first logbook. I've got another 6 pages. 6 pages of flying in here. Now, well, some of it I probably won't tell you all about, because it's all instrument work. It wasn't even in any airplane that I owned. It's airplanes that I rented out of Langley. And yeah, it was a PA-28 Warrior. And it was all different types of sequences, and IFR under the hood, VOR inbound, outbound. Oh, gee whiz. Limited panel. ILS approaches into Abbotsford. Anyway. Yeah, that's when I was kind of getting back into the instrument stuff for one reason or another. I'll tell you about that later. Anyway, folks, that's it. I'm going to wrap it up. It's getting on later on in the afternoon here. Going to take the dog out for a walk. And just run around the air park here for a while, or the airport, and we'll see you next time. So don't forget, subscribe button's down the bottom, right there. Oop, there. There. It's right there. That's the subscribe button. Or you'll see a round picture with my face on it. Just click on that, and then that'll subscribe you to YouTube. Or if you're on Facebook and you see me on Facebook, I believe on Facebook there's also a subscribe button that says subscribe to YouTube, and then you'll get all of my vlogs. And there's also a little bell, and click on that little bell, and it'll notify you when I upload another video. So folks, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you the next time. Bye for now.